had spent the better part of 2 decades trapped in the relentless, hypnotic rhythm of the corporate treadmill, a machine I believed was the sole guarantor of my self-worth and future security, convinced down to my core that the only true measure of a successful life was the velocity of my ascent and the ever-increasing height of my annual earnings. Every single morning, long before the first tentative rays of sunrise even thought about breaking through the perpetual smog ceiling of the metropolis, I would jolt awake, driven not by rest, but by a profound, pervasive anxiety that only the relentless ticking of a deadline could momentarily quiet. My routine was a liturgy of efficiency, a quick, almost painful gulp of scalding black coffee, barely registering the flavor, followed by a headfirst dive into the relentless cascade of emails, the daunting, color-coded complexity of spreadsheets, and the endless succession of high-stakes, time zone-spanning phone calls. My apartment, situated on the 50th floor of a glass and steel monolith, was an immaculate, stark testament to my professional rigor. Every surface polished to a mirror shine, every piece of designer furniture placed with intentional, minimalist precision, reflecting an order I desperately tried to impose on my chaotic internal world. My wardrobe wasn't merely clothing, it was armor, full of tailored designer pieces that broadcasted authority and unattainability. And my resume, a document of carefully curated achievements and boastful titles, was a weapon that boasted positions anyone in my circle would envy. Yet beneath this perfectly constructed, dazzling edifice, I carried a deep, cold, and echoing hollowness that money, no matter how much, simply refused to fill. For all those years, I had sacrificed everything deemed soft or non-essential, the irreplaceable moments of genuine connection, the simple pleasure of an unhurried morning, the profound human necessity of rest, thinking that the sacrifices were an unavoidable, justified cost of admission to the elite echelon I was aiming for. I convinced myself that missing family birthdays, canceling dinners with old friends, and watching from a distance as others built lives filled with warmth and simple joy were all merely temporary, justifiable casualties in the grand, necessary campaign for wealth. The memory of one particular emotionally turning Monday morning remains etched in my mind with unsettling clarity. My apartment was quiet, unnaturally so, the usual cacophony of the city outside rendered mute and blurred by a thick, oppressive fog, creating a strange, isolated bubble of expensive stillness. I remember slowly pouring yet another cup of coffee, the steam momentarily clouding my vision, before I finally stopped and stared at my own reflection in the vast panoramic kitchen window. The woman staring at me possessed the sharp, defined cheekbones indicative of stress and perpetual low-level hunger. She wore the standard-issue, impeccably tailored blazer of my professional persona, and her smile, when she attempted one, felt entirely rehearsed, a muscle memory designed for client meetings, not genuine happiness. She was me, the high-functioning, successful me the entire world wanted and expected to see. But she was a carefully engineered artifice, an elaborate performance. She wasn't me. Not really. It all began with a profound, almost debilitating exhaustion, a deep, pervasive, gnawing fatigue that was completely immune to the fleeting relief of either sleep or excessive caffeine. I was merely running on the momentum of habit, an automaton moving through back-to-back meetings, client calls, and strategy sessions like a disembodied ghost, the world a few degrees removed from reality. One pivotal day, during a particularly grueling and absolutely tedious board meeting centered on quarterly projections that felt utterly meaningless, I had a sudden, terrifying realization. I hadn't even consciously registered my own lunch. Couldn't remember if I had eaten or what. As my stomach let out a loud, embarrassed growl that momentarily broke the silence, everyone else around the table laughed politely at some forgotten corporate joke. In that moment of profound, simple human need, I felt utterly invisible in my own life, an observer watching myself from a detached distance, as if someone else, some driven, unfeeling entity, were piloting my body and making all the consequential choices, leaving the real me trapped behind a pane of impenetrable glass. The breaking point, however, came not in the form of a dramatic collapse, but in an unexpected, simple phone call. My best friend, Lauren, who had made the brave and sensible choice to move to a small, remote coastal town years ago, called me completely out of the blue. "You need a break, Mia," she said softly, her voice carrying a palpable warmth and genuine human connection that felt alien and utterly foreign to my current isolated existence. I tried to dismiss her, laughing it off, a sharp, brittle sound, while desperately masking the telltale tremor in my hands. "I'm fine, Lauren. Just busy." I lied. But the words were the hollowest, most transparent thing I had ever spoken. That night, I lay rigid and awake in my enormous, high-rise bed, staring unblinkingly at the ceiling, listening to the eternal, anonymous hum of the city below my window. And the inescapable truth finally broke through. I had spent an entire adult lifetime chasing money, external recognition, and ephemeral status, and in doing so, I had completely and utterly lost all knowledge of who I truly was beneath the sharp, carefully tailored suits and the practiced, perfect professional smiles that had been completely missed in the rush for the next promotion. At first, the guilt was a constant, heavy companion. The magnificent career I had meticulously built felt like it was slipping away, and the logical side of my mind worried constantly that my savings were finite and dwindling. But day after day, as I sat and watched the sunrise paint the sky in breathtaking shades of gold and rose, that gnawing guilt miraculously began to transform into an undeniable clarity. I recognized with crushing certainty that in my single-minded pursuit of pure money, I had effectively become bankrupt in every other vital sense of the word. Emotionally starved, spiritually malnourished, and creatively dormant. My salvation lay in small, deliberate acts of reconnection. One quiet, sunny afternoon, I found myself at the local market and struck up a conversation with a woman named Clara. She had the soft, silvery gray hair of someone who had lived a full, unhurried life. Her hands were deeply lined with the visible history of years of meaningful work, and her eyes seemed to hold the profound, silent stories of 1,000 lives well lived. For the first time in years, I spoke freely, truly unburdening myself about the suffocating pressure and the crushing weight of the life I had carried for so long. Clara listened without a hint of judgment, only nodding softly, smiling, and sometimes letting out a gentle, wise laugh at my exaggerated tales of corporate absurdity. When I finally left her, I felt undeniably lighter, as if a physical, concrete weight had been carefully lifted from my chest. I spent the remainder of that sacred week reconnecting with the forgotten passions of my youth. I pulled out old supplies and began painting again, letting the vibrant colors simply spill across the canvas in ways that were messy, exuberant, and utterly unrestrained. Ways I hadn't permitted myself since my carefree college days. I cooked elaborate, nourishing meals for myself, meticulously savoring each bite of the food rather than mindlessly wolfing it down in a frenzy between back-to-back conference calls. And slowly, subtly, something genuinely remarkable began to happen. I started to actually like the woman I saw in the mirror. Not the stressed-out, hyper-ambitious corporate version, but the one who laughed easily, who felt things deeply, and whose true dreams were thankfully not tied to the brutal confines of a paycheck. When that transformative week finally ended, I reluctantly returned to the bright lights of the city. But I was fundamentally, irrevocably no longer the same person. The inertia of my old life was broken. I didn't return to the penthouse or the endless soul-sucking meetings. Instead, I made the call that signified my final, true liberation. I resigned from the job that had served as my sole identity for a decade. In its place, I consciously chose to start working at a small grassroots nonprofit organization that specialized in helping women bravely rebuild their shattered lives following financial abuse. The work, as expected, was far from glamorous. The salary was decidedly modest and required careful budgeting, but it was profoundly, entirely mine. Every single day, I could see the immediate, tangible impact of my efforts, the genuine difference a helping hand, clear financial advice, or simply a deeply listening ear could make in a person's life. I actively reconnected with the friends I had tragically abandoned in my blind pursuit of corporate success. We began to share simple, nourishing meals, genuine laughter, and occasionally necessary tears. I made time to explore the small, ignored joys I had been too busy to notice, finishing a truly great book under the shade of a large tree, painstakingly learning to play the old guitar again, and simply listening to the sound of the wind moving through the city streets. I've finally learned how to be present, to consciously savor the little, beautiful moments that had always slipped past me unnoticed in the relentless rush. The money I had so aggressively chased for all those years, it had finally lost its power to define me. I remained financially responsible, of course, but I refused to ever again sacrifice my peace, my health, or my relationships on its cold altar. I began to truly understand that wealth is not, and has never been, measured in the dollar amount in an account, but in the time I controlled, the love I fostered, and the absolute beautiful freedom to be who I truly am. One rainy afternoon, as I walked through a park, I noticed a small girl absolutely captivated by playing with a paper boat in a puddle. She let out a genuine, utterly unguarded laugh when it accidentally tipped over, and I found myself responding with a mirroring, pure, and unrehearsed smile. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt a deep, pervasive sense of peace that no paycheck, no bonus, and no promotion could ever purchase. It was then that I grasped the profound truth. Stopping the chase didn't make me weaker. It made me whole. I began sharing my transformative story with others, speaking at community centers, writing articles about the supreme importance of self-discovery and personal fulfillment over societal metrics. Every single time someone thanked me for helping them finally see a new path forward, I felt my heart genuinely swell. I had discovered that true, lasting wealth is not accumulated in rigid confines of bank accounts, but rather in those quiet moments of profound clarity, in the simple, brave acts of courage, and most powerfully, in the daily choice to put yourself and your own integrity above the stifling, false expectations of the world. Years later, I returned to that small, familiar cabin on the coast. The paint was even more chipped now, and the rocking chair definitely had more splinters, but the vast gray ocean remained beautifully and eternally unchanged, a symbol of constancy. I sat there, allowing the powerful, relentless rhythm of the waves to wash over me, and in that profound stillness, I knew without a doubt that I had finally, truly found what I had been desperately searching for all along. Me. Not the woman chasing the illusion of money, not the one constantly bending under relentless pressure, not the one tirelessly striving for external approval, just Mia, whole, alive, and finally, unequivocally free. I learned a truth that should have been obvious all along. Life is fundamentally not about climbing higher, earning more, or frantically proving your worth to anyone else. Life is about knowing yourself deeply and honestly, embracing every single one of your imperfections, and having the courage to consistently choose the path that makes your soul feel light and buoyant. The day I consciously stopped chasing money, I finally found myself. And that, I discovered, was the single greatest and most enduring wealth I could ever possess.